Rees. I'm one of the digital leads here at the Construction Leadership Council. Thanks very much for joining the next episode in our Digital Connect podcast series. This is episode 5, joined by John and Bola. I will introduce those guys in a second. And we're here to talk about the information management framework and the refresh that's happening at the moment called the Information Management Initiative. And we're going to talk about the subject of starting from the outside in. And John will add a bit of colour as to what we mean by that. So Bola, did you want to go first with an intro?
Well, yes, thanks, Kevin. So I am Dr. Bola Abisogun, OBE. I am the Chief Excitement Officer. And I'll say that again for those in the back. I'm the Chief Excitement Officer of the Digital Twin Skills Academy. Chartered QS by profession, 30 years in the sector. Very disillusioned by how we deliver projects, and my main passion over the last 7 years has been how can we do better? How can we use data in a more structured way post Grenfell in relation to the Building Safety Act? And I'll leave it there and hand over to my brother in information management, John Roberts.
Yeah, Bola and I got introduced to each other. Oh, was it 6 months ago? And we got way overexcited about the fact that we had too many synergies going on. And yeah, I'm John Roberts. I'm Chief Engineer at McGee. I also teach at the Civil Engineering Department up at University of Hertfordshire under a Royal Academy of Engineering grant. I also do some work with my friend John Priestman at Priestman Consulting, helping digital startups and other companies facing digital challenges. Now, and 40 years ago, I was just on holiday from university, where I realised now I was probably writing up my software project then. So from my point of view, I came out and went straight onto CAD with Arup Associates. And so for me, this industry for the last 4 decades has been digital. And a bit like Bola, I'm kind of upset that we're not there yet. And so I had 20 years 30 years in consultancy, 20 with Arup, nearly 10 with Atkins. And then I've kind of gone over to the other side of the blanket. I was with Lang O'Rourke for a while, looking at their digital supply chains and their manufacturing and their just the way they deliver to site. And now I'm Chief Engineer at McGee, up close and personal, getting stuff done on site and still loving it.
Amazing. Love the energy and the excitement from both of you. John, obviously this is quite a big, bold topic. Just wondering if you can give us a bit of background, a bit of history as to, kind of the thinking behind some of the work you're doing at the moment.
Well, Bola and I have both been introduced into a group that I think it kind of spins out of the Construction Leadership Council, but it's being hosted by nima, who really brings a lot of information management experts and knowledge together, and there's a group there developing what has become the Information Management Initiative, which is still taking shape, but it's been really interesting to be involved in it. But one of the reasons I got pulled into this by Anne Kemp is the role that I've played often, which is listening to people. When you get a lot of experts, quite often they talk a lot, and sometimes they violently agree with each other, and sometimes you don't spot that they're not actually saying the same thing, but they're not actually meaning the same thing. And I did what I do in any design meeting. I started drawing, and it was really interesting when you draw stuff and you go, this is what I think I just heard you say, and they go either, oh yes, and another thing, or no, I didn't mean that at all. And so we'll put the diagram up now. This is the background of this. This evolved over a period of a couple of months. Bola can chip in because he kind of we played with it. Sometimes it was left to right, sometimes it was up and down. In the end, it became a circle, and it starts at the middle. And people call it the onion diagram, and Kemp's called it the story hub, that you can kind of look at this. And in some ways, this is nothing new. It's actually it's a vision that came out of the conversation of what the way the industry and our industry in construction and our data should be, and some of it's in codes already. This is literally drawn off my iPad, but that's the way we've left it because it's quite fluid. At the centre, what is the purpose of what we're doing? A client will know or should be able to define what are the things around productivity, economic and social value, sustainability, all the things. Why are they doing it? Be it a building, be it a train system, be it water, whatever it is. So you've got the owner and the operators, because we're going to make sure we talk about CapEx and OpEx in the centre. Consistent procurement, that's a big one. Because at the moment, sometimes it's quite random, and that launched the conversation straight away, where a lot of people around the table say, yeah, we have it, because they're coming from a high speed 2, for instance, background. And, and they know how the client has the consultants and then has the tier ones. They kind of then saw all the trade contractors outside the diagram. Whereas I'm in a trade contractor, I'm in the diagram, I'm producing the data as well. So there's a debate straight away. How you procure things, we can see from the web of blame. And I'll say the controversial thing at the beginning, and Bowler might want to say this. The web of blame diagram, I think, is really, really powerful from the Grenfell and reports, because, and we don't say this in industry enough, I've muttered it to a few people, I've muttered it to Bowler, the papers were shocked by how complicated it was. How could they let this happen? And to be honest, I think we've all worked in projects that look like that too much. In some ways, we as an industry cope with that. We work our way around that complexity. And it was I think people haven't almost talked enough about the way things are bought, because as you start to move out to appointing teams, and in some ways, if that's the way your teams are structured, that's the way your data is going to end up, which is why we're so fragmented. So as you go out, then you come up with consistent information management through this process. I learned that in the CapEx stage, we talk about CDE, combined data environments. It's also a thing that apparently is in OpEx, a world that I don't see that much of. Different types of data, we'll talk about it, but again, a phrase that Bowler and I came up with, maintained asset information. We'll talk about that in the golden thread soon. Also important for carbon and stuff like that. Eventually, you end up then thinking about other things that are coming in. We actually ended up putting manufacturers and project providers outside the central diagram. They were kind of, they can post stuff in. There's information that they'll be bringing in with the materials and the products that will then flow out when you demolish the building, recycle the building, repurpose the building, repair the building. The circular economy can be enabled by this diagram. And now this is the point where you move into a lot of stuff. I'm sure Bowler will talk a lot about approvers and insurers later as we talk about Grenfell. That's probably enough from me on that one. Do you think that was my version of the story, Bowler? I don't know if you've been along for the ride.
I have, John, and I've been privileged, and that's a really good overview. I think this diagram, Kevin, and for those that will be observing this wonderful podcast conversation, it will speak different things to different people and different audiences, and the outside in analogy is really great, because I'm coming from this whole challenge around consistency of data, structure, sharing, interoperability from a position of governance. And like John, I was drawn into this group because I couldn't say no to Anne, if I'm honest. Who can say no to Dr. Anne Kemp? I struggled. So I thought, you know what? Anne, I've so much love for you. I'm going to give it a go. Anne's words to me were a very focus group, very strong opinions, sometimes at conflict with each other. And I thought, oh, that's a great caveat. So I'm going into the lion's den. But then I met John. I didn't feel alone. So we were two random wild cards. But I always came from the angle that my use case for digital twins in particular, not BIM, not sexy 3, 4, 5D models, digital twins, i.e. virtual representations of systems, assets, and processes with a latency of data between the physical and the virtual. That use case I took to Grenfell. I used Grenfell back at my time at CDBB, where I was given the privilege and luxury of proving a use case around, had the client instructed a pre-construction digital twin, i.e. Gateway 1, Gateway 2 scenario, as we now have it. If that had been instructed back then, it's unlikely that the cladding would have ended up on the building, because we would have had a robust process of information management and sharing and procurement and all of those layers of the onion that John has so eloquently described. So I thought, I'm going to start campaigning to industry to fix this alongside champions like Dame Judith Hackett and co. I went out there and I evangelized. and I got shot down and spat at and all kinds of things because I was talking a language that spoke to transparency, accountability, and collaboration. 3 words that don't work well in construction. But I thought after 4 or 5 years, and I was really empowered by the Royal Assent being awarded in April 22, Building Safety Bill becoming the Building Safety Act. As soon as I left Cambridge, CDBB, and I thought, well, of all the conversations I've had thus far, i.e. nearly 5 years, I was losing the winning of hearts and minds. And then I thought, what is the most impactful client group? So every project, regardless of its asset type, needs 3 things: people, finance, and insurance. And I thought, if I go and talk to the insurance guys and girls and inspire them to see the value proposition of data, structured data, interoperable data, and therefore digital twins at an asset level, the same assets that they're underwriting the risk for with limited visibility, because if we now think about Grenfell as an insured asset, if the insurance company had known pre-construction that the proposal was to put on cladding that was totally unfit for purpose, they would have either multiplied the premium so that it was so expensive and uneconomic, or they would have pulled the cover. But because they didn't have that visibility, they continued to insure an asset that was actually uninsurable. And that is why, for me, the most important client group outside in, with the exception of the resident themselves who occupy these assets, is the insurance and the approvers who need visibility of the risks proposed or in place when we talk about legacy assets. So this diagram does 2 things at least. You're either in the middle working way out, or you're outside going towards the center. But I think there's a conversation and a story for every stakeholder, whether you are a laborer, plasterer, tiler, roofer, project manager, engineer, and or accountable person / asset. There's a story and there's a connection. And what I think John and I brought to the group of such eloquent information managers and data scientists was perspective around how does it work on site? Because the golden thread in my head is a great idea, but it will only work at site level. That's where it works or fails, at site level. So we've got to think about that diversity of value proposition and supply chain, but we've also got to think about the relationship of each stakeholder with data and information. And that's why I found the IMI such an exciting project to deliver. And now that we're here, what's next?
I know.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key things, it's interesting, I touched on it, you've to go through your journey post Grenfell, is we aren't just talking about Grenfell. That's why it's important. There's things like the circular economy on here. But the best, in some ways, from our industry's point of view, the best tribute we can have to the people who died there is to sort our stuff out. And I came to the conversation wanting to solve carbon and the circular economy bit. And now it's interesting across our sector. I've been writing papers on it just the last few days about what we need to do to solve Gateway 1, Gateway 2, and all the Building Safety Act. But it's the thinking behind that and the way you put the golden thread together. If we do that and we then extend it to other elements of the project, I think it is. You can use lots of phrases. A Trojan. It could be a Trojan horse, but I'm hoping it's obvious the fact that actually it's not just about high risk buildings. We could now take advantage of everything we've been doing in this industry for the last 20 years around digital and actually make some progress across so many other fields as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, guys. I mean, you showed me this diagram, a couple of weeks ago now, and 2 things struck me straight away. One was the simplicity. I used to be an engineer, so I feel I can say this, but the original building information modelling mandate, it was designed by engineers for engineers. And I think very difficult for non-techies to kind of get to grips with, well, why would we want to do this? And I think that the work that you guys are doing starts to bring that to life and add purpose and context to the role of information management in major programs. I'm blown away, actually. It's one of the best diagrams I've seen that bring it to life. The other thing that struck me was I'd never thought about the role of approvers and insurers in the way that you guys are describing it. I completely agree. That's a really strong incentive for driving the right behaviour. if it's implemented in the right way. So all I can say is thank you guys for sharing that diagram, because I think it's great, and I think it really does bring it to life in a simple way. So just thinking about the original BIM mandate, it was 2014, wasn't it, when it was officially launched by government for public sector projects, at least.
We had.
Yeah,
Maybe not,
absolutely.
but...
And I'm just thinking that a lot has happened since then, and I think a lot of good progress has been made, in particular in infrastructure, where I think it's really starting to drive benefit for clients. You've picked on quite a number of different areas that could be priorities as we move forward. Just interested in your views on, as you said, it's kind of what's next. What would be the next right step for us to take in the information management initiative?
Kevin, what an amazing question. And I know that your questions are designed to challenge and provoke, which is nice. I'm going to play nice today because I think, one, you're such a nice guy. And I think we're going to have a great reception to this conversation. But I think, look, in simple terms, we've got to make this whole conversation easier to understand, right? It's too complex, right? I'm 30 years in as a PQS, and I can tell you now, my peer group of quantity surveyors, for example, as a professional group, do not engage with this conversation the way they need to. We are custodians of cost, quality, and time on a project, right? That's my connection with Granville. How can we fix those three key variables using data? But one of the challenges I've always had as a PQS is that there were two things. We do a cost report every month. Depending on the firm you work for, it'll look different. It'll be structured in a little bit, well, it's in a similar way, but with slight nuances. And once we press send and that cost report goes to the client, all of the information is redundant because it's two-dimensional. So I'm a fan of the digital twin because we're linking data through APIs and keeping that data tangible, relevant, robust, and visible to the client. So that once I've pressed send on my cost report on day 1 of a given month, day 3, a client can dive into our common data environment, for example, one of the things championed by the BIM mandate back in the 2014-16, and actually see what's happened in the last 48 hours and not wait for my next cost report 30 days later. So that's an example of agile data. And I think the principle and ambitions of the BIM mandate back then were to do a number of things, one of which is to reduce costs, increase inefficiency, increase productivity, increase accountability and visibility, and therefore generate better returns on investment. But what was missing in that ambition was the upskilling piece. And the upskilling piece that was required back then is now required on steroids today, because we now have a legal obligation called the Building Safety Act, i.e. golden thread. And now we've got to figure out how on earth do we get there, because we've had 7 years. And like John said, we are still nowhere near where we need to be. So the BIM mandate was a great idea. I think it got lost in translation, largely because of the complexities of the ISO 19650 family of standards. And then there was no leadership. No real, I mean, NIMA's tried, UK BIM Alliance tried, but there was no real leadership. And that's what we need now. The IMI is about focusing all of that good stuff on value-based outcomes, but through senior leadership. And that's why the CLC, I think, is the right forum to promote this conversation. But John, help me out, buddy. I mean,
yeah,
have we done it? Have we fixed it? We've had 10 years getting nowhere fast, largely.
Yeah, I'm not. Okay, I know what you're like. You're quite restless. You're quite, well, actually, I do the frustrated bit of the time as well. But I wouldn't knock it too much. In some ways, we have been growing this onion. We've been building up, and really, the BIM mandate did provide a reason for a lot of people to develop 3D skills, get used to the idea of a CDE. It's taken ages to realize that BIM doesn't. I've bought a big box of BIM, and I've put the software on, and now I'm doing BIM. In some ways, BIM is one of those words where I don't really talk about it much anymore. I'm much more about what are we doing? Because digital's implicit in it, and actually, okay, we're using tools that, but I think there was a great bit of data, which actually a few years old from CITB that I ran into the other day, which is about the fact that actually, it's what was the number in 2035, 71% of 71% of the workforce of 2035 is already in the industry.
That's right.
Now, there is this mental thing in place, and this I think is the big challenge coming up, about the fact that actually somebody else does digital. We're going to get all these young people at university and they're going to do digital for us. And it's a kind of othering. It's somebody else does it. All the tools are now in place. But I think, and this is something I've evolved in the last few years, and actually going to universities and seeing the way people navigate around the building, the way that essays get issued. the most important tool that we have as an industry now is this. It is the camera. And because we are going to now, instead of sites just being people who have digital done to them, and basically, it's done in the head office and they issue the drawings and they print it off and they walk around with a piece of paper like they've always done. The flow, like I actually drew this a long time ago, working with Anne 20 years ago, and I kind of suddenly, I want to go back and find this diagram. Like you say, there was a snowball of data that the consultants start it, and then it will roll through the contractors and they'll find it really useful, and then all this data will land on the clients and they will be grateful. Well, of course that didn't work, because it's not really sorted out. But from the contractor point of view now, if you think about, if it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen. That's how the golden thread's got to work. If you haven't got a photograph of it and it's posted in the right place in structured data, all of those tools are out there. I have seen them. That actually, if the key publishers to the golden thread are not going to be the consultants. I think they're going to be the people putting the cavity barriers in place, pouring the concrete, and actually, for me, that in 2025, I know that I'm off talking to people straight away in 2025 to really try and emphasize this, because I think it's a big cultural shift that actually, it's not, we have a QA thing and then we stack them up and then it goes somewhere. You are almost continuously publishing data in a structured manner back to it. I love being at McGee because in some ways we're mainly about concrete, and actually concrete's not that complicated. Somehow as an industry, we've got to work out how you aggregate. That's not a concrete pun, but it is. How you aggregate that data from us all the way up to the people doing the fire alarms, people doing the windows, all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have the main contractors are going to, and hopefully we'll come to whether or not it's a differentiator later. Hopefully we standardize it, because otherwise it's going to be a nightmare. Yeah. And I don't think there's why. Yeah, go on.
But that's why, John, I had to come in, buddy. That standardization piece has got to be driven from a governance perspective. And that's why it comes back to insurance, Kevin, because I'm telling you, buddy, this is the silver bullet. Once the insurance companies recognize we are not going to be issuing you a PDF 4 or 5 page questionnaire asking you about your asset on renewal, we're only going to ask you for an API link. And we want the API link to your twin of the asset that you want us to insure. That's a cultural shift and a change. There's an investment required, but behaviors have to change, right? And if conditions of insurance become aligned to productivity and workflows and competency, you'll get the paradigm shift happen overnight. Yeah. That is why I'm excited. I'm reverse engineering the logic, because actually the one thing that even the construction phase needs is insurance. But once the construction phase is completed, the asset becomes insured on a different policy. But insurance is continuous. And it really, for us, the golden thread starts at planning gateway 1 now. So there's an upskilling piece that is not just about using and being aware of technology. It's about actually, what is my relationship with the project? And what is my contribution to the perpetuity of the golden thread? Because the golden thread never ends. Unless, like John was saying, we get into circular economy, we decommission the asset. And even then, because this is the McGee space now, how do they decommission that asset in view of net zero and decarbonization, in view of doing it the best possible and the safest way and the most efficient way, and in view of passing that data on to the next recipient if we decide to recycle some of that process or assets, right? So it's not rocket science, but there's a huge upskilling. My disappointment, guys, is the fact that we do not see continuous professional development as a thing. We see it as something only professionals have to do.
Yeah.
And we need to make that normal. We need to normalize that. And that is what I'm exploring with the CITV. But unless we get that universal appreciation of continuous professional development, using smart tech, using smart tools in an easy to understand way and a standardized way, we're going to be having this conversation likely in another 2 decades. And we don't have that time.
Sorry, John, just a couple of points I wanted to pick up there that I think are really important. One is around the idea of enduring information. I love that. Because if we're going to make the circular economy work, I think we need to think about information in the same way as we do the physical asset. It can be recycled, reused, help us learn and improve as we go forward in the future. I think that's really, really important. The other thing is just to shine, I suppose, a positive light on the evolution of BIM, thinking back, 10 years ago when it first started to get moving. It was kind of the BIM team over in the corner, wasn't it?
Yeah,
isolated on the project, doing BIM that no one else kind of understood. I think fast forward to today, some of the work I'm doing now with Northumbrian Water, everyone is talking about it. That's not to say everyone really understands it, but at least now everyone is thinking about it and the role of information in the project. The other thing I wanted to pick up on, because I think that's really important, is it's taken on 10 years in infrastructure at least to get from low level of understanding, BIM team over in the corner, to where we are now, where everyone's talking about it. I agree, though. How do we now democratize it? And I think the idea of using the technology that everyone has, the good old mobile phone, I think that's a genius way to democratize information management. And as you say, John, get the people out on site, driving it forward. Right, I think we can have a discussion all day just about that.
Everybody sticks tags on their holiday photos. Why don't we go and do it at work?
Couldn't agree more. We don't leverage social media enough, I don't think, in our industry.
Well, it's taught us the skills that to post stuff on the golden web.
Yeah. And Bernard, you picked up on digital twins. I love this topic. I'm a digital twin enthusiast through and through. Worked with CDBB on the National Digital Twin Programme historically. Can't talk about digital twins without a shout out to Sarah Hayes and the work that was done in 2017 and Data for the Public Good. It I think that's kind of where it really started to take hold. Right. Just interested, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm interested in the role of digital twins in this outside-in approach. Where do you see the value of digital twins working in that scenario?
Well, first of all, I've got to build on your reference to Sarah Hayes. She was our project manager when we wrote the Digital Twin Toolkit. Wonderful piece of work. I mean, that was this group times 10 on steroids for almost 2 years. So that was amazing. But I think to your question, Kevin, about where digital twins fit in, for me, if we remove the visualization for a minute and just focus on digital ways of working, and linking agile live data sets that have a latency, whether it's an hour, a day, a week, but they have a perpetual loop of information coming backwards and forwards. Mm-hmm. Those are the scenarios I want to kind of educate the sector on. And if I give you some context, if we think about how a QS, for example, would produce a valuation, I have a theory that may drive out design and build at some point, because I've always believed that clients want to have a fully designed scheme before they break ground. Always been the utopia position. Never got there because we go ahead with letters of intent, all this kind of nonsense. Reba stage 3.5, we get on site, we try and prep for Reba stage 4.5, and we get it all wrong and variations and all the rest of it. But in the world of digital twins, it is possible now to build a 5-dimensional version of the asset before you break ground. And that 5-dimensional asset takes your 3D plus time plus cost to give you 5D. And if the entire design team is happy to proceed with the appointed contractor at Reba Stage 4, they have a virtually designed project that they are then tasked, i.e. Gateway 3, to build in reality to get the physical equivalent. And once they've built that physical equivalent and commissioned that physical building to talk to its virtual, you have a perpetual data stream over the whole life of the asset to optimize performance, to increase the asset value, to make insurance assessments easier, because any significant or material change to an asset once it's built has to be captured for insurance purposes. And this is where the power of data and the role of digital twins really comes to life. The challenge we have is, as I often ask when I do some public speaking events, is who is ready to coexist in that ecosystem, right? Who in the design team can flex and fly in that scenario? Client aside for a minute. And then when you look at the vertical supply chain, tier 1 to tier N, who is competent to participate and ensure that that gateway 3 construction phase is as best and delivers the 1-to-1 ratio? 1-to-1 ratio being is an exact replica of the virtual and not a 99%, 95% because stuff didn't work on site. We just fudged it. But how do you get that 1-to-1 ratio? And how do you get the supply chain to recognize actually for everything we do, all the products that we've used, the people we've used, everyone's competent and we can evidence that? How do you demonstrate that in a chronological data set that encompasses the construction phase and then can be handed over to the FM team to then optimize that asset? Digital twins become a silver bullet, but there's got to be a level of upskilling. So I think moving forward, as I've said in many cases, you wouldn't buy a car, you wouldn't buy a second-hand car with no service history. And in 2 to 5 years, asset owners will not be able to achieve optimum price points for assets without digital twins of those assets to evidence how well they've been maintained, looked after, and therefore the increasing value appreciation by having a digital equivalent to optimize its performance. So the role of twins for me is here to stay, and that is why at the Academy we're focused on 16 to 25 year young professionals to get them into the sector to expedite this paradigm shift that has to happen, because the 50 somethings like me are struggling to understand how quickly we can move, but we are out of time, Kevin. We don't have the luxury of time anymore. We've got to get this thing done, right? And if we look at this challenge globally, we're not in first place anymore. We're languishing in 3 or 4, in all honesty. And we're a superpower. We are the beacon of innovation in the UK, apparently. So let's step up. But in order to do that, we've got to get all of our people ready. We've got 2.7 million people in our sector that somehow have to figure out their relationship with digital. And digital twins is the new language. BIM was the old acronym, but the digital twin has a way of life. And this is agnostic to sector. There are twins in healthcare, education, finance, insurance, built environment. Twins are agnostic to sector. We're just figuring out the twins for the built environment. But it's one of the biggest sectors, one of the biggest contributors to net zero. So we've got a real challenge, but I'm excited. I'm so excited because, like John said, we've got all the tools. We've got no excuse to say we don't know how to play the game. We just have to do some homework, i.e. upskilling. So they're here. And it's a paradigm shift, Kevin. And I think obviously you're an evangelist, so you know that it's coming. It's coming.
Can I be a mugwump? Maybe it's because I'm not one of the 50 somethings. Unfortunately, I'm one of the 60 somethings. And I don't know, digital twins. It's just not touched my life in the last 10 years. And for me, it's a word a bit like BIM, that it's become too complicated. People point at we got a CDE, so we got a digital twin. No, I can remember Mark Enzer talking about the fact that actually you start from what question are you trying to answer? And I can really see, and that's actually always, what are we doing? I spend nearly all of my time in reviews now is not about the technical stuff. I spend my whole time going, what are we doing? I've done it a few times. You just say, what's this meeting about?
That's right.
Half an hour later, everybody's still discussing what the meeting's about. Why are we here? And it feels like that in construction sometimes. So I avoid the term digital twin, which I know, having spent the time in Cambridge, you're probably going to we spent too much time talking about onions. And but for me, the worry I have about it, I get the way you're up training people, but at the same time, is it going to become a distraction that will other the idea of digital? And that actually this idea that it goes root and branch down to every person that I have recorded one of the best things I remember, and it's stuck in my head and I could never answer it. And I can now start to see the answer. About 2014, Paul Morell at one of the sort of the BIM UK BIM mandate launches talked about we won't have solved this until we know what it means for a 3-man plastering business. And I actually asked him about this. He's forgotten he said it now, but actually it stuck in the back of my head because I thought that's really interesting. And actually now it looks like they get told where to go in the morning via an email. They go and photograph the materials that they were going to do, that they're going to use. They show the starting condition of the wall. They photograph the fact they finished, and eventually they get paid through the phone. And because you see that if you're having work done in your house, you're getting they're all sending invoices off these, and you're paying them through those. And we're not that far off. But for me, the danger is that actually, I think we've still got 5 years of work to make that work in our business, in our industry, and really kind of so will we get distracted? Because I understand why clients want them. I understand why a water company wants them, because actually it provides better outcomes for them, financially, for regulation of service, quality. You can write the whole list. But on the ground, on a construction site, will it be a distraction? That's my worry.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Kevin, just
another
quickly,
podcast.
Probably, but I think, look, for me, the reason why the digital twin is so important as a process, as a solution, is because we have an overarching ambition around net zero. And there is no way on God's earth we are going to be able to measure our net carbon footprint at an asset level if we do not twin those assets. And that's the real driver for me, John. It's not about the distraction, which it has already become, by the way, right? It's about the use case. What is the use case for the digital twin in the context of net zero? And that is unavoidable. You can only ever manage and evidence your net carbon footprint in real time using digital twins, period. How we get from A to B is a question. And I'm suggesting that we use the building safety heavy lift to then pivot into net zero. But we've got to get upskilled. We've got to upskill
right. All the clients we talk to, expensive bits of land in central London, they want to get going as soon as possible, which is why staged construction's important, and that's not going to change. And also, a slide I've been using for nearly 20 years is about the fact that why isn't construction more like aerospace? Well, they're a vertically integrated business where because Airbus design stuff, manufacture stuff, own stuff because they lease it, and then actually maintain stuff as well and get rid of the stuff at the end. If they spend more money at the top, they make more money at the bottom. Correct. In some ways, whereas we are a vertically disintegrated industry. Correct. Where we sometimes even we just flip the asset over to somebody else at the end. But was it 20 consultants for a central London building, 70 subcontractors, all the materials coming in? We're not going to change that. Somehow we actually need to find a way of dealing with that complexity. And my concern is having a big because what you described sounds like a unified thing.
It is. And it's designed to be unified.
And we have enough trouble making the unified thing that's the building. The idea of trying to actually make a digital unified thing before we start the building sounds, you'll have to stop us, otherwise we'll just keep going.
No, I didn't want to start that conversation at all. I mean, it's I think what it kind of reflects is the real need to start with the outcome. And as you said previously, actually taking that a step further, thinking about some of the external influences that can drive the right behaviour on some of these major programs and projects. I think that's vital. A couple of things that really struck my mind there. One was really around the upskilling. The reason I say that is, we are in construction, and in fact, the global population, an aging population. We've got to make our sector more attractive. I'm actually quite positive about the role of digital twins. I think the technology is there now to help us accelerate. But I'm kind of interested in your views in relation to information management broadly, but also digital twins. How are we going to drive that acceleration? You were talking there around some of the other industries like aerospace. You think about Rolls-Royce and the power by the hour model. They couldn't drive that commercial model without a digital twin. That's kind of what what underpins it. I do wonder if we've got, you know, the wrong business models in our sector to drive this level of change. But just interested in your views.
That's it. Business models. You've said it, Kevin. I've said it, and I'm trying to disrupt my own. I'm trying to disrupt the business model of the PQS. Because if I said to you, as I'm saying now and suggesting and have been for years, that actually we're currently sending each other versions of Excel, Word, PDF, no real idea whether the current version we're sending is the right version. Case in point being contractors working to the wrong set of drawings on site because the CDE is being updated, paper drawings don't reflect it. That's a challenge. But when you think about the role of data and the relationship between the professional and what we should be doing at all times, we should be managing data in as much as we have to collect the right data. But in order to do that well as a professional, we are mandated to stay on top of our game regarding CPD. So we have to upskill ourselves. That's a CPD thing. That's a non-negotiable requirement of being a chartered professional. But we have to cascade that thinking, Kevin, all the way down the supply chain. And to do that well, we have to change our business model. And the business model of the PQS moving forward will be API driven. We will not be sending Word, Excel, PDF. We will only be using APIs. And that's why, to John's point, the smartphone is so important. The smartphone is all about APIs, right? So we're already there at some level of description without realizing it, but we've got to make it known that this is the way we do stuff. This is the way we have to standardize it. And this is the way everyone has to feed into the same challenge in the same way for the same reasons to try and generate the same or similar value-based outcomes, right? And that's where the upskilling piece is so important. But the business model of the main contractor, for example, that will change in such a significant way over the next 2 to 5 years. Main contracting may not be referred to as main contracting because the business model will flex and it will have to change. And I think that's why I'm excited for John at McGee, where we're going to embark on this ambitious opportunity to try and articulate what a Gateway 3 scenario looks like for a McGee, right? And to do that, it's about looking at their current business model, seeing where it can be improved, not only at an operational and senior level, but all the way through the value chain, and thinking about what that outcome needs to look like, but getting to the outcome first. So you think with the end in mind first, at all times. And that's why the twin is so important. Think about it. You said it. Rolls-Royce have a business model that is reliant on twins. And they optimize the whole process of design, and then they commercialize it as a product, pay by the hour, pay by the second, pay by the minute, because they are managing the virtual with the physical and the physical with the virtual. We have to get that into construction at some point. And I think legacy assets, existing buildings, are a good playground, which is why the Building Safety Act focuses on legacy buildings. You've got to take dumb buildings and make them smarter. And one of the ways of doing that is by tweaking the business models of those who are running those buildings, but also the building itself becomes more agile. So business model development is going to be crazy. I'm so excited about that. But we need to get professionals and clients to understand that. Are you willing to blow yourself up on paper and rebuild yourself very quickly in order to stay competitive? That's the kind of conversation we have. It's a very robust, it's a nuanced, it's an emotive conversation, but it says, actually, if you want to survive in the next 5-10 years, your business model has to be tweaked. And that's where there's a lot of pushback, because people don't think, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that our billable hours go down by 20%? Well, you're billing for 20% a time that you shouldn't be paid for anyway, is the reality. But, you know, when we talk about efficiencies and all that kind of stuff, the business model begins to get questioned. And when it gets scary, it's because you think, well, I've got to do a lot of this stuff that's going to hurt my business, and I'm not ready for it. So therefore, the broken model that works really well continues to work well. But we've got a different driver now. The driver's legal and it's golden thread, it's building safety. And it has to change. There's no debate. It has to change. And that's why the IMI, I think, is a foundational layer of that change.
Yeah.
Interesting. What are your views, John?
Alongside the business model conversation, which is important, the other thing is a phrase that I use. Business leaders need to go on about it an awful lot more. Because in some ways, we're moving to a world where you're delivering two things. Like, we're used to the fact that we deliver a physical asset. We're saying we're now going to deliver a digital asset alongside it. And I remember, John Priest and I always laugh about this, where we had a shared boss And it was the point where Atkins were planning on setting up an office in India. And I was involved in the committee, and nobody was quite grappling with it. Everybody was he was making all this noise. But for about 9 months, you knew that if you met him, he would mention it. And it's like a number of times you kind of like avoid the question. And it basically, you just always knew that was going to happen. And I ended up living in India for 2.5 years. In the end, I thought about it so much, I put my hand up and just went, nobody knows what to do about this. Let's go. And I started with a team of 10, went to 170. It's now 4,000. So that was the power of somebody just going on about stuff. And actually, when I was talking, Royal Academy of Engineering was asking how we're going to teach net zero. And I teach a lot of other stuff in the civil engineering department, a lot of stuff just to do with the design process, because actually all these things contribute to net zero. You can't just do it as a separate subject. But I wrote on the bit of paper, every time a student meets me, at some point in the conversation, I'm going to go on about it, to show
net zero.
Net zero. Yeah, and basically it's going to crop up in some aspect of the conversation. We could be talking about anything, and it's just going to actually just be in there to be another thread in it. And in some ways, from the clients who we build buildings from the leaders of all the different organisations that contribute to our disintegrated industry, I think all leaders need to go on about it more.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. Just thinking about, we're in a sector, aren't we, that's very focused on delivery. So the natural response is let's just get on and deliver. And
I know we're very
can do. Time to step back.
We're physical.
One thing you said there that sparked a thought in my mind was around, the role of people. I was thinking about net zero. Net zero is something that's happening globally, where everyone can understand the impact. You can look out the window and you can see it on a stormy day. You can look at the news reports about flooding and droughts, all these things that are happening across the world. It's very easy, I think, for people to understand why we need to do something about net zero. If we talk about information management or digital twins, I'm not convinced we've yet articulated it in a way that makes sense to people. So why would a project manager want a digital twin? Why would a mechanical engineer want a digital twin? Not quite sure we've got that balance right. What are your views? Do we need to put people at the heart of this as well?
Definitely. Go ahead, John. You go first, buddy, because I'll go wax lyrical on this. You know me.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I can imagine you singing a song on this one. I think it's the key thing now is hearts and minds. It goes back to that conversation we were having at the beginning, where all the pieces we don't need any new technology.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I'd be quite happy if our industry cancelled innovation for the next 5 years, because we don't need anything in a way, because the innovative thing would be our industry delivering what we were asked for right every time, and to time, to budget. I used to work in a team called Engineering Excellence. It's a phrase that gets used a lot. The only trouble is when you work as a kind of technical expert, like I've done a lot of my life, you actually do get wheeled in when things go wrong. And occasionally you just feel, forget engineering excellence. Wouldn't engineering adequacy be nice? And actually that's true across every organisation I've worked in. Screw ups happen, and sometimes it's like, we should have avoided this. So it's for me, I'm just really interested in the fact that we have better information into the hands of people at the right time, at the right place, that they've taken, we've taken their feedback. This is one of the things I've enjoyed. This in some ways, my journey from having worked with modernist architects, going through to the fact I'm now standing down holes with people who are hitting London clay and going, this is wrong. This wasn't on the drawings. For me, it's about this. This mission we're on around information is kind of making sense of my life, and I think for me, it is now about mainly the hearts and minds of people seeing that it's important that this is part, that digital is part of their day job at every single level.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that answered your question, but it was a rant I wanted to get off my chest.
No, it did actually. I think that was a good response. Bella, what are your views on this one? You say wax lyrical?
Well, no, I think I can't really add much more to what dear John has said there. But look, it is about people, and that's been my challenge, Kevin, and that's why I've not exhausted the conversation with people. I've had it consistently for 7 years, right? Since that Grenfell event happened, I focused on we can do better. Dame Judith Hackett is saying the same thing. Dame Judith Hackett is lambasting the industry. And at 11 a.m., Kevin, 11 a.m. on the 4th of September, when Sir Martin Morbick sat there and read the executive summary of the final phase 2 report, I was moved beyond recognition. But I also saw that the ambition I had for the academy was articulated in those 58 recommendations. What I don't want to happen is for one of those recommendations to come true, which is that there's a licensing scheme imposed on the industry. If that happens, we are in big trouble, right? But what we've got to do, to John's point, is get not only senior leaders in the room in a moral capacity, we've got to now empower everyone in the value chain to do the right thing all the time, even when people aren't asking you to do it, right? That's a cultural shift. But it's about people. We've got, like John said, far too much tech. Every time I go to UKCW, digital construction, there's more stuff. We don't need more stuff. We need to understand how to use what we have in the most efficient way and make it person-centric. And that's why, from my perspective at the Academy, we're talking about micro-credentials and making it relevant to the person. If you make training and upskilling relevant to the person, Kevin, you get their buy-in very quickly, because it's the what's in it for me scenario kicks off very quickly, right? We've got to get that down to 1-to-1 for 2.7 million people very quickly. And once they realize their ability to make money or lose money, or to be relevant or irrelevant, to be right or wrong, based on their relationship with technology, i.e. data, i.e. IMI, you will get a sea change. But if we infuse that ambition with an insurance deliverable that says you got to do X to get Y, and if you don't, you'll be cancelled out, you're going to get magic happening very quickly. So it's the emotive, cultural conversation that has to happen, that I've been having for 7 years, and I've enjoyed within the context of the IMI group. But the question is, what's next? How do we now shift the paralysis, as I call it, into action? How do we shift that without carrot and stick? Or with carrot only, no stick. Or with stick and no carrot. How do we do it? Right?
Well, the thing is, you have described a massive stick there. The idea that actually you get a note from your insurance company that says you have scored 47 and therefore I'm putting your premium up by 30%. that is a stick, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. It's going to happen, and that's where you get the people person piece going.
We've looked at our AI has looked at your golden thread, and you've scored 47.
There you go.
So, Bailey, you said something, and this is probably actually another podcast in its own right. But I think the sector is good at innovation. You mentioned you go to Digital Construction Week, all the different events, and there's, as you say, lots of great innovation happening in the sector. Making that innovation business as usual, that seems to be a real challenge. And that's given me an idea for another podcast, actually, because I think we could talk just around that subject for a little while. You both picked up on the role of leadership. I suppose you've got the stick end of that, which is kind of the outside in, working with insurers to make sure that the right incentives are there. We talked about senior leaders, but I wanted to unpick that a little bit. Do you think that clients, owner operators of built environment assets, do you think they're doing enough to drive the right behaviours?
That's a great question. Do you know what, Kevin, if I'm honest, I talk about us being in the era of the intelligent client, right? And I say that in all humility and with all due respect. We are in the era of intelligent clients. Now, we've got two camps, at least. Those clients that are willingly trying to do better because they know it's necessary, right? That's a very small camp in proportionality to the industry itself. Then we got the camp of clients that says, do you know what? We've got a need and we have no care how we get there. And technically, that's how we ended up with Grenfell, regrettably. right? And then you've got this bit in the middle that says you've got a whole group of people saying, which camp do I join? Do I run after price? Do I run after nostalgia? Do I run after a personal driver that says I want to work with people that I like and therefore can relate to? Or do I just try and do the best I can and attract the right clients because of my value proposition? And that's the camp I sit in, the value proposition camp. But clients have always been able to do or not do the right thing. My issue today is that there's a lot of denial with clients around accepting their new responsibilities, not only in a golden thread building safety perspective, but actually the fact that we've got to build safer, greener, more intelligently with better value-based outcomes. Now, that may not hit our budget. That may force us to exceed our budget because we don't have the right tools and processes in place, but we've got to have a go. And then you've got the others throwing money at stuff because they think they've got the right people on the team. But the clients have to be educated too. Clients actually have to upskill. I talk to a lot of clients who really don't know what they're buying. They want a building, but they don't want the construction phase. All right, well, great. Well, then I'm not sure I can help you. But maybe you should just be in the real estate investment space and not in the construction space, because the construction is the most riskiest phase. But some clients still don't know what they're buying and therefore are procuring in the wrong way, procuring the wrong people as part of their design teams, and procuring the wrong outcome without realizing. By the time they do realize it, it's too late, i.e. you get up with things like ground floor. So the client, for me, that's the client group that I think will be influenced by the insurance. And unless and until you reverse engineer the logic, you take the luxury of decision making to some degree away from the client, and you instill it in an environment that talks about this is how you have to operate. And if you don't operate this way, there's a consequence. You get clients in that headspace very quickly, behaviors will change, outcomes will change, asks will change, EIRs will change, project descriptions will change, procurement will change. But you've got to get clients to own up and say, actually, I don't know what I don't know. Can you tell me? And you can't get design teams talking about stuff that's redundant or not relevant, because in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we've got. So we got to get clients to be bold, ask better questions, drill down, use AI co-pilots to second guess and just have some fun along the way. But it is all about the client. It always has been, but even more so now.
Yeah.
What say you, John?
There's a whole range of different type of clients out there. In many ways, in the private sector, the work we do at McGee in central London, because land prices are so high, we're kind of fortunate in a way, because actually that drives all sorts of cost-related stuff and all sorts of other pressures, which means we do get, as an industry, as a sector, in that area. Probably this is why I get enough time to go and think about this stuff, is because we. But at the same time, you see, I think most clients are. Well, in the private sector is one thing. As we've seen, public is Grenfell, different set of pressures, different set of dynamics. Where there are some very good clients out there, but in some ways, I think in all organisations there is this phrase I used to use a lot, which was that you quite often get enthusiastic people at the work face who like the new tech and they kind of want it, and you get people talking about it at the top who want it because they can see all the productivity advantages. We haven't talked about productivity advantages. There's huge productivity advantages if we sort our data out. I've often joked the fact that actually we're relatively safe from AI because basically we don't understand our data. It definitely doesn't understand our data, because we're such a mess. Don't write anything down, save your jobs. That's not true. We haven't got enough people. We need AI. But there is a lot of organizations have a squishy middle layer. There is the people who kind of know what they do and they don't want too much change and stuff. And a lot of things culturally get bogged down in that squishy middle layer of middle management who see it as a disruption and mucking up life. And you can really notice every now and again you run into an organization that has somehow managed to flip that area of its company round, and that you really see words at the top turning into rubber on the road at the bottom once you get that middle bit sorted out. So I think this goes back to why I think clients need to talk about it all the time. And I think what you said about I don't know what I don't know, the other word I've heard you use a few times is humble. But in some ways the whole of my career, I've kind of, maybe because I've been in India and a bit, and the whole idea of the cycle of life and the idea of moksha, where you eventually lead the perfect life and you're released. I always think that actually at the end of my career, perhaps I'm aiming to try and get to this point where I realise I didn't actually know anything at all. At which point I will be released from engineering. Probably get rid of me. But for me, that I spent all my time. It goes back to that thing. What are we doing here? It's a really powerful question, because actually, and sometimes we're just, you put too many clever people in a room who all think they know what they're doing, and things fall through the gaps. So in some ways, with digital, what are we doing? What's the outcomes we want? How do we reverse engineer back to it? What's the simplest way we can do it? How can we take everybody on that journey? And those are the kind of messages I think that leaders at all different positions throughout our industry need to be going on about all the time. And
that's super interesting, guys. Just I suppose picking up on that discussion, one of the things that excites me about digital twins is the idea of connected digital twins. Mark Enzo can talk about this much more eloquently than I can. But if you've got a client that's doing really well, they're managing to transform their business, they're driving those productivity gains, they're upskilling their people, and you've got other clients out there who are struggling, what if you could connect those digital twins and help the others upskill faster by learning from the best in industry? I think there's a great deal of value in that. Is that kind of in your thinking, guys? You kind of thinking about the role of connected information across organizations and possibly even sectors?
100%. And I think, the anytime I enter into that conversation, Kevin, the very first thing that comes up, which really just embodies part of our cultural, I would call it derogation in many ways, is that, oh, what about cyber? What about cybersecurity? What about security prevention? I said, listen, cyber is always an issue. It's not unique to digital twins or ecosystems. Cyber is an issue in your smartphone, right? It's an issue all the time. We just have to de-risk it as best we can. But in the context of connected digital twins or an ecosystem of connected digital twins, my utopia position, for example, is based on the person. Can you imagine a digital twin that connects education to housing to health to financial products, right? For an individual, and it's unique to their needs, and their data sets are unique to their requirements, but yet you've got institutions and other organizations talking to each other to optimize the mental health and well-being of that person. That's a utopia position based on an ecosystem of digital twins. So why is it in that context it kind of sounds okay, but when we talk about buildings and assets and construction, we struggle to make the connection between the two? It doesn't make sense. Ecosystems of data should have value proposition written all over it, irrespective of the use case. The use case is what drives that need. And I think in a construction built environment setting, the need for me will always now begin with the insurer. What is the insurance company underwriting? How are they going to be comfortable? How do they optimize and protect their balance sheet? And how are they willing to engage? Right. Once you get that right, the client gets empowered, the right design team is appointed, and you build the right asset. And it's not rocket science, but it is all about connected digital twins. It's all about connected sets of data that are structured and interoperable. So we're not going to get away from it. We're running towards this. But is everybody running in the same direction? That's the question. That's what the leadership piece has to corral, right? The leadership has to corral that, right?
And going back to your question at the beginning, Kevin, about joining people up, sharing stories from organisations, and about how we all can lift our industry together. I think that's really important. And in some ways, there's this whole thing we've got about got to do innovation. Digital's this cherry on the top that will win us the next job. Well, it's in some ways we want to get to the stage where it's no longer special. It's something we just do. But often people don't talk about the new. We've got clever information. Hold on to it. Information is power. No, I always think that if you come up with something truly innovative, everybody starts talking about patents and various other things. In our industry, you're probably just incrementally improving things. And maximum, you're going to get a 2-year head start. And in 2 years, everybody else is going to be doing it as well. So in which case, you might as well go out and talk about it now and look smart for 2 years and just realize that you've got to come up with the next rabbit out of the hat in that 2-year period to make you look. And even though, and there's a couple of times we've both done it here, even the act of actually going there and going, this is a subject that I really, really don't understand. I think this is the thing I need to solve. I'm struggling with this. I've done that a number of times in my career where I've stood up on stages and sort of talked about stuff I don't know. And especially 20 years ago with early carbon stuff, I gave a talk there where I basically said, I don't know what's going on. How do I change what's this embodied carbon thing? I don't know. And I had lots of people came up to me afterwards. I said, I'm so pleased you said that. And at least it was, there was a network of us who then started talking to each other about it. And it's like, I think we feel that we need to hold on to data too much. I think we feel we don't want to share any vulnerabilities enough. And I think there is a power in doing that, and you get seen as a collaborator and an open contributor. So in some ways, that telling stories piece to each other is really, really important, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing that sprung into my mind as you both were talking there actually was, as you said, there are some clients out there, organizations generally across the supply chain who are, moving forward at leaps and bounds, I guess. One of the things that comes up in a lot of conversations is, are we creating a bit of a digital divide, or do we risk creating a digital divide? Maybe one exists now, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but interested in your views on this, because I think, we could end up in a situation where you've got a large part of the sector that's moving forward and accelerating away from everyone else. Do you see that digital divide as a potential problem?
Definitely. And and this is where I talk about my passion being the micro business community, who technically aren't resourced financially or otherwise to address all the stuff that the larger businesses, your Build UK membership, for example, can deal with. That digital divide has been around for a while. The challenge now with that divide becoming exponentially bigger by the day is the fact that those that can resource their way out will. They'll pull on grants and funds, and they've got the right people and teams, etc. They will fly, and they are. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got 3-person micro business, plastering firm, just wants to get a day's work done, doesn't have the back end, the resources, the know-how, the connectivity, the access to all of this good stuff, IP knowledge, etc. Can't pay for consultants, doesn't have the time to go and check and read, and they need stuff given to them. And that inability to give stuff to them, which I'm hoping that IMI will begin to do in some capacity, is what needs to happen. And that divide is not only horizontal in terms of size of firm, it's now vertical around competence of the individual within the firm. So if you've got an amazing 5-person fit out team, for example, and they're doing work really well, making money, good margins on profit, and doing that well, great. They could be as effective as a 250-person business, because the 250-person business is just so inefficient, unproductive, and unstructured that the digital divide also becomes an opportunity. Because if you can galvanize the right tools, irrespective of your size and type of business, you can become as efficient as the bigger peers who are struggling because they're like super tankers, can't move very quickly.
Yeah.
And I talk about, again, reverse engineering the logic. This is where the micro businesses, the smaller businesses, have an opportunity to excel. But guess what, Kevin? They're going to have to upskill. And this is where it falls over. That constant. I will always come back to one word: skills. At the Digital Twin Skills Academy, that's where we're evangelizing the upskilling piece. Those that take time to learn in motion, as I call it, learn as you work, will excel. And the digital divide has become a leveler, because if you see what happened post-COVID, once COVID happened, the world shut down, no one could move. And everything went online, everything went digital. And those that have captured that eureka moment and built on it have become more efficient, more agile, more technically adept. They may not have grown in size, but they're slicker as a business. Again, it comes back to business models. The bigger firms have struggled. Many have gone out of business, as you've seen. Many have gone bust because their business models are too rigid. And that digital divide can be a consequence of privilege in many ways, because if you don't leverage it in the right way, it can become an ill to your business. So I think in as much as it exists and it could get worse, it's also an opportunity for the smaller, more agile businesses to raise their game and become more competitive. So I'm excited again.
It is interesting. That size piece is quite important, because it is, as you get to a bigger organization. I've worked, in Arabs and Atkins and Lang O'Rourke. You spend a lot of time trying to make sure you're talking to the right people. Change happens, and that's not to say they don't do it, but it goes back. You are in a super tanker, which has its certain advantages, pros and cons. But this is, and it's interesting being in McGee, where I think we're about the right size, about as big as you can be, because physically we're inside the M25. We have one head office. You can go to all the, you can visit half our sites in one day just by getting on the tube, and actually that kind of helps have a single culture. And this idea about being able to drive change and drive uniformity as a lab, as a lab to explore that, I find that really, really interesting. And because we can't have a digital divide, but unfortunately let's just talk about the information design. I'm selling this house at the moment, which we built. I'm buying a 2-bedroom new flat. There's going to be a homeowner's file coming over to me because it's a new flat. Nobody's asking for any information, which I have for this house. They're going to get it because I feel like a fraud if I didn't give it to them. But no solicitor said, where are the drawings? And there's certain things to do. Have you got these certificates and what? And they got really hung up on the fact that, certain bits of information. But I mean, you're asking the wrong questions.
Yes.
And somehow we just need to get to the stage where somehow we record the right information about things. But it is a problem, the fact that everybody in this country thinks they can build. Now I saw a random TikTok type video the other day of some influencer going, I had this door, I want to get rid of it. So I found some scraps and I nailed them up and I put some plasterboard and like, ta-da, it's done. And I'm just thinking, that's like everything that's wrong in construction in that one video. The fact there's no records. We have no idea what material she used. She was completely unqualified. And the only thing you got is a TikTok video out of it. And unfortunately, we've got to get to the stage where we just do our information about things and the future life of things much better.
Absolutely. Oh, I could not agree more. What if all the professionals out there started making TikTok videos, another revenue stream?
That would be a different direction. It's a different business model, but it's an interesting one.
So just... guys, my mind is blown by this conversation, and conscious that we're sort of need to start to wrap up. There's an awful lot to take in that conversation. I'd be interested actually to have a follow-on podcast with both of you maybe next year, just touch base on some of this again. But as we move forward into 2025, interested on your views on what's the next big step that organisations could take to help them on their IMI journey.
Christ. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Nail the golden thread.
There you go.
Nail the golden thread.
It's interesting that a book that has just landed, and it's my Christmas reading. I am that dull. There is the Institution of Structural Engineers have just brought out a list, which is a book which talks about Gateway 2 and Gateway 3 information. And that covers a lot of the stuff that we do. Now, straight away, there are 2 fantastic, very big tables in the back saying this is the information you should be looking at. And it's really interesting when you get into the granularity of it, where things like quality plans, the quality plan records a lot of the strategic information already. There's probably a couple of things around qualifications and competence that we need to layer in. That's kind of there. I'll come back to where it goes. That's another question. We pour a lot of concrete, and actually our pre-pour spreadsheets, I think actually we just extract that with APIs and stick them in a structured database. That's ticked. You then start realizing there's all these other things. We've got some bearings on the job, and actually bearings aren't mentioned in the form. Where do you put the information for bearings? This thing about where do you put the information We haven't solved that yet as an industry. And it's like, and actually even the kind of the form of your structured database, because like there's no commercial advantage for McGee to come up with a cleverer golden thread. We just need to come up with a golden thread. Nobody's, in some ways we've got to think about it. How do we just standardize the hell out of it? So for me, the beginning of the year is just about get everything else. Just understand how we're really, really going to deliver it. Because when I started reading the stuff from the iStruct, it's very good, and it's also very provocative. Because all the time I'm going, but what about that bit of information? And like, there's a thing about water grease. It wants all the stuff about calculations. That's a gateway to about crack control. But then he doesn't actually say we're recording anything about how it ended up. So there's gaps, and and it's if we could just if in 6 months' time I could come on here and be really coherent, it'd be quite a dull podcast. So I don't think the Construction Leadership Council wants it. But if I could be coherent about this is exactly the information that we deliver at Gateway 3 for, because actually that's just for the work that we do as McGee. Multiply it by 100 for when you start getting into some of the digital systems that underpin safety in buildings. But we have to do that, and I think actually every organisation, somehow we all need to go away and go on that journey and talk to each other about it.
Kind of summarise that as just get the basics right from 2025.
There's a lot of clever thinking behind getting the basics right, to be honest.
I think just to add to that, and you both probably know this, 16th of Jan this year, golden thread regulations kicked in. 6th of April this year, the end of the transitional period to get your act together to comply with the Building Safety Act, and specifically the golden thread, became a thing. 6th of April 2025 is the 1-year anniversary. And I'm working behind the scenes with CITV on trying to figure out how we can produce some upskilling type components of micro-credential learning to help the sector. But the big step is exactly that, as John has described. We as an industry have to figure out Gateway 3. We have to. And my plea to you, Kevin, and the entirety of CLC and the wider industry, and that's all of my cohort at CIC, Construction Industry Council, is how on earth do we inspire leadership to really take a good look at what they are doing to deliver the Gateway 3 outcomes? Because if we don't focus on that, Kevin, none of this matters. The IMI has a role to play in that, but the Gateway 3 construction phase, in my head, digital twin is the most important component right now. And I will be reaching out to John for reference to the iStruct e-paper, because I need to read that too. But I want the leadership to understand they've got to figure out what is going on their sites in the Gateway 3 capacity. If it doesn't keep you up at night, you're probably not in the right job. Keeps me up at night. It's that critical, Kevin. It is that critical. We need to figure it out.
And in some ways, Gateway 3 is not an event that happens at the end of the construction period, which is the way it's kind of written. It's the fact, and it goes back to this, why I think the idea of the pre-pour spreadsheet and just harvesting the data on that is because it means this is why you need to think about it right in the front, because we're, as McGee, we're 2-3 years before the building's handed over. And so we don't want to kind of paper chase where somebody says, oh, can you have the Gateway 3 now? And you have sent somebody runs around and goes through all the files and photocopies things. And we've seen it happen over the decades. But no, it has got to be the fact that actually that information was harvested on a day-to-day basis during the construction process.
Correct.
And in some ways, it should. Once you've done the thinking about it, there should be zero additional cost. Indeed, when something goes wrong later on, it becomes easier to go back and find out what was going on. So this goes back to the productivity. I think once we've sorted all that information, it becomes a resource for the future. And but that's why we got to sort it, because otherwise we're all going to be sitting there with dodgy photocopiers in 2 years' time trying to achieve Gateway 3, and we're all going to. Well, I'll have retired.
Let's hope not, guys. Look, John Bowler, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come and talk to us. Learned an awful lot, and there's a huge amount to take away from this discussion. The idea of developing the story hub, telling those stories, getting leadership bought in to drive that change top down, as well as all the great work that's happening bottom up. I agree with both of you. Absolutely vital to driving the change that we need. Thanks to all of those that have watched this podcast. We'll be back again in the new year to talk about modern methods of construction. We'll be joined by Ron Lang and some experts from the world of MMC. So please do join us for that next episode. Take care all.